Hello, Chill Computer Guy. Today we're taking a look at Pt.2 by Sonic Academy. This is a really great synthesizer. In part one here, we're going to look at the oscillators. Now, there's a total of 6 oscillators. Now, there's 3 wavetables, they call them, but don't let that confuse you because you don't necessarily need to use wavetables, but these can do basically single wave oscillators all the way up to 3D wavetables. So all those types of waves can be loaded into the first 3 oscillators here. And so yeah, you have very basic waveforms like the saw, the sine, the square, the triangle, and then it starts getting a little bit crazier from there, and then it goes all the way up to 3D wavetables. So very versatile oscillators, and you have 3 of those. Okay, next to that you have a drop-down menu, so you can copy one oscillator to the next. You can reset. I love the reset. You can reset that oscillator, or you can import your own waves. And when we take a look at the browser, we'll show you how, what I basically did is I imported all my 3D wavetables from Serum, and you can use them right here in Anna. So it's pretty powerful. So you have 3 of those, and then each of those has a sub-oscillator, okay? Now you can also control the HD. This is going to, of course, take up more DSP, and then this is going to actually let you know. This is telling me that this is just a single wave, and then if you load up, an actual 3D wavetable, this will be highlighted white, and then you know that this phase knob will be switched to a position knob or whatever. I can't remember exactly what the knob's called. Let's load one up here real quick. So if you go to 3D wavetables, go to Bell, for example. There it is. You can see now 3D is lit up, and then this changes to morph. So pretty basic stuff right there. So yeah, there's that. So the phase is going to be the phase. Of course, if you have a 3D wavetable, that's going to be switched to morph. Okay, and then you have your pulse width, your sync, and then your FM, and then your FM amount, of course. Now, if you load sine waves in, you can get some FM action and whatnot. We'll talk about that later on. But just to know that all of these controls are oscillator specific. None of them are global. So like I say, each oscillator has a sub-oscillator, which you can have a square, triangle, or a sine wave there, and you're not going to hear that until you turn up your sub here. So yeah, so we have 3 of those. Of course, you have your octave, your semi, your fine, your velocity, M velocity, which is your morph velocity, and then your key track, of course. And then you have voices. You can have up to 9 voices. Each oscillator can have up to 9 voices. Your detune amount, your width, which is pretty great. Your shape, width, your shape. Your sub-oscillator, you can pan the oscillators individually, or you can actually route them to either filter 1, filter 2, or both. Or if you don't want to route them to either filter, you can actually click this X, and then they will not be routed to either filter. This will basically send the oscillator straight to the output. You also have an individual volume. With each individual oscillator, of course, you have a volume. And then, like I say, yeah, all 3 oscillators are exactly the same. Now, when it comes to FM, if you turn on, let's say, oscillator 2 and take it to a sine wave, let's say, you can actually use that to FM. If you have a 1-voice sine wave in oscillator 2, and now you can FM under your source, you want oscillator 2, and then you can FM. Pretty cool. So let's say I go to oscillator 3. Again, I got to put a sine wave in there. You don't have to put a sine wave, but I recommend a sine wave, and we're going to take this a couple octaves down. So oscillator 3 is going to be a lower octave. And if you go back to oscillator 1, that's the source oscillator 2. If you want to switch that to the 2 octaves down, click on oscillator 3. Now you're FMing from a lower octave. And you have to turn up your voice. You got to make sure, go to oscillator 3, make sure your voices are turned up. If you're trying to FM and it's not working for you, you got to go to that oscillator and make sure you turn the voice on. So now we're going to FM from that lower octave. So again, FM oscillator 2, FM oscillator 3, 1, or oscillator 2. So yeah, and so that's basically how the main oscillator 1 through 3 wavetable works. Let's go ahead and load a wavetable in here real quick. Now what's great about the ANA also is if you click down into the wavetable section, it's going to open up a browser. This is what oscillator you're loading that particular sample, that particular wavetable, that particular single wave. It's what you're loading it into. So right now we're looking at oscillator 1. We can switch this to oscillator 2, oscillator 3, and then we can also select from our samples, our 3 sample oscillators. So the fact that you can drop stuff in all 3 oscillators and all 3 samplers from this browser is super convenient. Not only that, but you can switch it over to this type of browser, and then you can actually create a user. So I haven't imported anything yet, but if you click here, you go show and explore, this is going to open up your finder. That's going to open up your finder, and then you can basically just drop whatever samples, preset, wavetables, it's all under the user. So if you go into user, you have the main oscillator and the sample oscillator. If you click on the main, you can put it under 3D wavetables, analog or digital. Which under 3D, I actually took all my serum tables and put them in there. And so now I have access to those in ANA here. Now under the sample oscillator, this is where you can put all your samples in. You know, so you can steer ANA to pretty much any place on your hard drive. Import my Iris2 library. And so if I import my Iris2 library, now all those samples will be available right here. We can just click those and instantly have them in our sampler. So as far as the samplers, your start point of the, then you have your loop end, so you can make very short. Now of course you're going to get a pop, but they have an X fade control. If you turn that up, it's going to alleviate that pop. Just this control is just so cohesively loop anything without that annoying pop, because every time you try to make a short loop you get that pop. But just this one simple X fade control is just so perfect, you know? And again, these are the greatest controls. You have a nice perfect high pass, you can cut out the lows on your sample. Maybe a low pass on here, I don't know, or maybe to be able to switch between a high pass. The high pass is super useful, but I could see a low pass also being somewhat useful depending on what you're trying to do. This is the start of the sample, the loop start, the in start, the X fade, which is just wonderful. You can pan it right and left, and then of course you can send it to filter 1 or 2, very similar to the wavetable oscillators, or you can click this X and it'll go straight to the output there. A volume control, and then up top you have the clear button, which is great. You can instantly clear the sample. Retrig, which is self-explanatory. It's going to re-trigger with each key as opposed to staying in a loop depending on what key you're hitting. You can loop the sample, which of course if I unclick that, the loop markers will disappear. And then of course the shaded area is is the area that's looping. You can reverse the sample. Your octave, your semi, your fine, your velocity, sensitivity, and then your key tracking, of course. And yeah, you got 3 of those. Not only that, but you have a drop down, so you can copy them to one another. You can remove the sample. You can import a sample right here from this area. So very, very similar to oscillator 1 through 3. And that is the 3 sample oscillators. It's one of the 2 or 3 gripes I do have about ANA is the fact that you cannot open up the oscillators full screen like this. Now, we haven't talked about the graphic envelopes or the G envelopes yet, but it has this little icon here, and it makes this envelope full screen, which, like I said, we haven't talked about these yet. This is a very, very powerful. These envelopes are really, really nice envelopes. You can put them in a step mode, you know, very, very nice envelopes. But I love how you have this huge, big screen. If the oscillators, I would like it if the oscillators went full screen. That would be super nice. So maybe in an update, the graphic envelope's awesome, full screen. You can also open up the chord and the arpeggiator full screen, as well as the settings full screen, and also the oscillator browser, you know, full screen. I'm calling it full screen, big screen, larger screen. It's a larger. It basically takes center stage in the UI kind of thing, you know. But you can't really do that with the 6 oscillators. So that right there, that's the 6 oscillators that come with ANA. Next up, we're going to move to the filter and the envelopes. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. We're going to have part 2 coming right up, and we'll see you guys again.